special considerations on disability. There's a lot of content in this chapter, but you're not going to run across it on a daily basis. Whenever you do run across it, though, you need to be prepared as to how you're going to handle the situation. First of all, make certain you get your best foot forward. You don't ask a question that's inappropriate. Please list any disabilities. No, don't ask that question. Don't ask if they want to be a dolphin or a fish either, if they want to get hired for the job. This is in the same classification. Don't sit down and go there in the aspect of setting yourself up. Have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim? On what basis? Even though that would be a good question to ask and you'd like to know the answer to that, you can't legally do it. One time we hired an employee and she was on the job less than 2 months, and we painted all the parking blocks in the parking lots bright yellow. They're almost impossible to miss. A week later, she tripped on one of the freshly painted bright yellow parking blocks and had a workers' compensation. She was off. When we finally got her back on a regular basis, 10 months later, 10 months of salary, she quit a week later. We found out that she'd also tripped over 5 other parking blocks at 5 other companies that she worked previously. You can't ask the question. Yes, some people sit down there and abuse the system. However, you still can't ask the question. Do you have any disabilities that can prevent you from performing the requirements of this position? You don't ask that. You don't use the word disabilities. I'll show you how to do it in just a second, though. How did you become disabled? It's a nice question to ask, and it sounds really sincere. Don't ask it. Okay, how often do you expect to miss work? That might be a legitimate question, but let's look at some ways to say this differently. This job requires that you be present 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and lift 150-pound bags. Can you do this? Can you also stand for long periods of time? Can you meet these requirements? You've already asked multiple paragraphs of question by asking a specific question all rolled into one without treading into the area of inappropriate questions. If you're aware of a disability, okay, you can always ask, how do you plan on performing the following functions with or without an accommodation? Ask them the question, put the burden on them as to how they would do the job. And then you turn around and you listen. Okay. The employer, you can always, as an employer, you can always request documentation for the requested accommodation. You have certain rights as an employer. Don't be intimidated because this area of law is so difficult. If you really get frustrated by it, check with your legal counsel. But with that, you can always ask questions in these areas. Obesity is out there as an issue. So pay attention as to how you're going to handle that. Think about the whole aspect of it. That should not be some time of precursor to disqualify it for somebody's job, except in some very unusual circumstances. Alcoholism. You need to separate the issue of alcoholism from misconduct. If somebody is missing a lot of time and the employer says, and the supervisor comes to you and you're in charge of employment law, and they say they drink all the time. They're always gone on Friday afternoons and they miss Monday and sometimes Tuesdays. They smell of alcohol, I've had people come to me with that. My response to the 3 times I've had that happen was, I missed that in your personnel file. Are you qualified to determine whether or not they're an alcoholic? Have you gone through formalized training for alcohol and drug rehabilitation? I missed that. Well, no. Then keep your mouth shut if you're not an expert, if you're not trained as to how to do with it. Now, tell me what they're doing. Well, they're missing work on Mondays and Fridays, and they reek of alcohol. I said, okay, but are they doing the job? Well, no. Well, then what elements of the job are they not doing? Separate the issue of the misconduct in the work or lack of showing up or whatever it may be from the issue of alcoholism. Otherwise, they become a disability. Now, alcoholism is proven in court to be a disability. There was a Ford Motor Company lawsuit, and a marketing person who sold to fleet cars, he felt he had an obligation by the employer and was encouraged to do so and had an employee allowance to do it. Take people out for dinner and entertain them and have nice meals, and including alcohol. He became an alcoholic, sued, and the courts found it in his favor. Alcoholism is a disability, and be careful about it, but be careful also in the aspect of if you're going to try to help somebody with alcoholism, make certain that you know what you're doing because of the fact it's very difficult. I have helped 5 employees get through the issue of alcoholism, and 3 of them do not like me to this day. One of them loves me nonstop, and the other one's neutral. By the time you're all done, you spend a huge amount of time trying to cure a problem that only they can cure. You can create an environment to help them be cured, and you can get the certifications and everything in the process as well. But at the end of the day, you as an employer have to deal with the employment actions that are there and making certain you're focusing on that, and don't dive into the area of trying to help somebody get over one of these issues unless you have a certification in that area. Smoking. A lot of people find it offensive, okay, but is it an addiction, disability? There's no cases. Stay tuned. It's America. We'll have a case coming up eventually anyway. Alcoholic employees, if the employer suspects it, okay, then inform the employee at Counseling Services if you feel that way. If it continues, give the employee a firm choice between treatment and discipline. Make certain you have somebody qualified to sit down there and push them into treatment if that's what you plan on doing. In my case, probably the most difficult case, I says, here it is. You either take a 30-day unpaid suspension or enroll in over here. I said, but there's no guarantee. If you go back to this, you will be terminated. So I had the entire thing, and so that's probably the most extreme case. Sometimes you have to do that, but don't go there without the certificate showing that you have some formalized training in this area. Focus in on the behavior. Drugs. They're really difficult because now we have marijuana legal in 37 states, and it may be eliminated altogether as something illegal on a national basis. Pay attention. Drugs aren't covered, but a lot of people that are addicts, one of the problems with it is that too often that they can't get off of it unless they actually crash and burn, and too often that means crashing and burning at work before they do it in their personal life on top of that. So be careful on that one. Major life activities, be careful about, sometimes if it impairs that, then all of a sudden it becomes a disability. Allergies. By the time it's all done, there are people that are sensitive to workplace chemicals and they simply can't do the job. Try to find an accommodation, but if you can't do it and it's part of the work environment, make certain that you document every aspect of it. Pregnancy isn't covered necessarily in the aspect of a disability, but you have the postpartum depression that does qualify. So pregnancy really is covered by FMLA, but you also have the aspect over here of postpartum depression, as well as you need to have some type of lactation coverages as well. The aspect of gender dystopia, pay attention to that, but be careful about trying to move that into the disability thing. Service animals, be careful about allowing them. They need to have permission first. They need to provide some type of actual certification that the animal that is a service animal is real. Snakes don't qualify. I work in the school systems, and we have an extensive thing across the entire state of California. And so with that, we determined there's 2 kinds of service animals. There's dogs, and believe it or not, ponies. There actually is a miniaturized pony that can be trained to be a service animal, and all the other ones were not qualified to be service animals. So be careful. Make certain you consider the law and what the law considers to be a service animal, and that it's a real service animal and not some bizarre aberration that somebody just loves their pet. Other issues, really explore reasonable accommodations, have open, frank discussions, consult with the employee by asking questions and having them respond to you. Document the dialogue as if they were in negotiations. Be proactive. Make certain that all disabilities, not all of them have to be accommodated. Some people will have a disability and they just get through the job in the process, but if it comes to affect their work, then you need to have that dialogue. Document everything. If they have an issue and they're off for a time period, you can require a doctor's note. Pay attention to all the different things that are out there. Look on the statutory protections that are out there. It's going to strike the right balance between the individual with the disabilities and the employer as well, and do it on a case-by-case basis. Because somebody had a case like this before doesn't mean the person you're talking to needs the same accommodation. It could be more severe or less severe, or it may not need to have any kind of accommodation. So disabilities are on an individual basis. Not every impairment needs protection. There is a balance between the employer's right to hire somebody and expect them to fulfill the obligations of the job and produce quality service or quality parts, and their need to sit down and make certain that they're trying to accommodate somebody that has a disability. You do not need to accommodate every disability. Sometimes the best thing is to have a parting of the ways in the process. It just depends what they are. Ask sound questions in interviews. Be careful about that. Plan ahead of time. In my opinion, I do not believe supervisors should wing it in interviews. I think all interviews should be pre-structured with questions. You can ask questions that vary after that based upon their answer, but there should be pre-reviewed questions by human resources, and those questions in the process should be sit down and held to specifically on the first, second, and even the third interview before they start drifting off asking questions where the supervisor wanders and says something inappropriate. Look for content validity for questions and assessments. Be cautious on claiming alcohol or drug addiction. Look at the performance, support animals, make certain, expect to have that formal certificate, and sometimes you may have to sit down and have a physical exam where appropriate. This is a great area. It's an opportunity for you as an employer to expand. It's also, as an employee, knowing what your rights are in the process, but always have that clear communication is the best way for resolving any type of disability issues within the workplace. Take care.